Good luck.
Thank you, Fabricio. I'll be running through our forecast for the SER fleet and AdBlue consumption in China, as well as looking at how that feeds into the existing supply network and how we see the current direction of the market and what potential risks we might see arise. I've done my best today to translate some of the slides into both into Chinese with the help of Cheryl and also an online translator as well. So apologies if any of them look a little bit off. Cool. So to run you through the agenda for today, so I'll look at the key drivers for the AdBlue market, followed by our forecast, and then we'll look at the dynamics of the supply network within China, and then an interesting topic of looking at AGU production, and particularly looking at the AGU, our automotive grade urea export market from China to 2028, followed by my final remarks on the current standing and potential risks going forward. Thanks. For the current drivers, the way AdBlue consumption model, we take a look at vehicle sales and then how they work in terms of diesel penetration rates, SCR penetration rates by OEM, and then also how the fleet is degraded in terms of scrappage rates over the years. And these are kind of key drivers really looking at it. So I'm going to look by firstly tracking the vehicle market right now. So we're only looking at 4 sectors here. So it's passenger cars, light-duty vehicles, medium and heavy-duty trucks, colored in gray, and buses, a small segment at the top. When we're talking about AdBlue, the key markets are those which are diesel markets. So you can see in the pie charts highlighted on the right-hand side of the screen that the largest market is the truck market for diesel in terms of penetration rates. In 2017, we estimate that, it is true of the 93% of trucks, medium and heavy duty trucks sold with diesel. In our forecast, this is expected to dip slightly down to kind of 90% over the period. When you look at the light vehicle market, the key market is the light-duty vehicle market. These are light vehicles that are used for commercial purposes, and we estimate that 13% of these are diesel-consuming vehicles. In the passenger car market, at the bottom, colored in integer green, you can see that the majority of these vehicles are gasoline-powered. Increasingly, a number of these are new energy vehicles. So it's a combination of gasoline hybrids or pure electric. Expected that some of these are diesel, but over 90% of them are gasoline-powered purely. Market, which is trucks. So I've taken a segment of time. So we're looking from 2005 onto present year with a 1-year forecast in 2018. You can see one of the interesting things is that government policy has been a real driving force for current trends. So in 2018, during the economic crisis, the Chinese economic stimulus package was first put in place. And there have been a number of payment packages issued over a 4-year time span. So you can see that this has led to truck sales rising dramatically over this period to its height in 2010, before dipping. You can see a recent low was in 2015, in the first year of China 4 emission standards, before rising again the following in 2016, mainly driven in the later part of the year by the overloading restrictions that limited the length of trucks and also their loading capacity to make the market safer, but also remove agents who were unfairly competing by overloading their trucks and driving dangerously. Anyway, this has led to a huge, dramatic rise in sales year on year in 2017, and we're expecting this to hold steady into 2018. When you look at the light vehicle market, there's been a strong growth over the time span. What I've done at the bottom is I've broken out light vehicles into passenger car sales and light-duty vehicle sales. So with passenger cars, it's only for passenger purposes, and light-duty vehicles is for commercial vehicles up to 3.5 tons in gross vehicle weight. One of the interesting trends to look at in this chart is that if you look at the proportion of sales between these two segments, increasingly more have been light-duty vehicle sales. So they're roughly even in 2017, changing from their kind of position in 2010. When we look at the passenger car sector, the key consumer trend at the moment's been that customers are demanding larger passenger vehicles. So you can see that in this pie chart in the top left-hand corner is looking at the split in 2013, where the majority were these compact cars. And we've seen in 2017 that the SUV market has expanded rapidly and now represents the majority of sales in this segment. This would be an interesting development for looking at, because some of these are diesel vehicles, and so there's going to be growing demand potentially from this bracket. So now we look at the bus sector. So one of the interesting trends has been that the electric bus fleet has grown drastically in recent years. So this has been driven by the New Energy Vehicle Program, which started in 2010. This initially began with providing subsidies to vehicle manufacturers across the board, and then in 2015 is where we see first subsidies being issued to consumers. The majority of these were local governments. So we've seen many stories in the news about Chinese cities going pure electric for their bus fleets. And if you look at the aggregate number, that means that actually what we're seeing even from the first year of subsidies being issued, the majority of new sales were pure battery electric buses. This is sustained, even though subsidies have been decreased slightly, by 40%, so fairly drastically in 2016. In 2017, it's still held true that the majority of sales are pure electric for buses. For AdBlue, this is important because actually, even the remaining diesel sales, many of these are hybrid diesel buses, which don't require SER. And even for the slender amount that do remain to be diesel, it's a small share. And ultimately for AdBlue, the Chinese bus AdBlue market has been virtually removed from our forecast. Only the older vehicles are kind of remaining in the fleet, but they're slowly being scrapped. As you have a mandatory scrappage rate year of, I think it's 8 years in service, a bus has to be removed from the fleet. So we expect to see this kind of removed in kind of 2022, 2023. So now moving all of these factors together, I'm going to show you how we're expecting to see the SER, the selective catalytic reduction fleet, grow over the next 10 years, and which are the key segments and how that changes. So this chart here is showing for 4 segments, which I've already been speaking about, how the SER fleet is developing. So you can see that the existing fleet is, the majority is SER-equipped trucks. So in 2017, the total fleet was 1.3 million units in size. In 2017, we've seen China 5 legislation come in place we saw legislation come in place in July of that year. And this has led to SCR penetration rates rising, and you can see that in the fleet. There's been a kind of acceleration in the growth of the SCR-equipped truck fleet. But the crucial pivotal year is going to be 2022, with China 6A for light vehicles coming into place, and we'll see the first SCR-equipped light-duty vehicles enter the market. Equally for trucks, with China 6A expected to arrive in the same year, in July also. We expect that all diesel trucks sold will require SCR, as we've already heard yesterday in many of the presentations. And this is going to lead to a continued acceleration of this fleet. When you look at the light-duty vehicle fleet for SCR and trucks, they become roughly even as we enter the end of our forecast in 2028. But looking at the non-road fleet and the bus fleet, it's a very small percentage of the market. OEMs. So you can see from the transition from China 5 to China 6 that the main move's been that we moved from a situation of SCR use or EGR for many to all using SCR, some using SCR in combination with EGR. The way we build up our AdBlue consumption forecast is that we treat pure SCR use for any OEM to have a higher AdBlue dosing rate than one that's a combination of SCR and EGR. This is for China 6. This is taken from primary research by from Lin, our Chinese analyst, who's kind of called around for many of these OEMs and discussed future strategies for the next emissions legislation. So we take this on a OEM by OEM basis, which neatly follows into the forecast. So we're looking here at our forecast from 2017 to 2028. The key market is trucks, which consumes the vast majority of AdBlue in China, and we expect to continue to be the main consuming market. Interestingly, despite the growth in the light-duty vehicle SCR fleet segment, it's still a very small part of the market, given mileage is considerably lower within a year. Equally, the amount of diesel consumed by these vehicles is a lot lower. When you look at China on a global stage, so in 2017, we estimate that China represented 11% of global AdBlue consumption. This is going to grow to 20% in 2028. But what's interesting to point out is that it will remain to be the third largest AdBlue market. We previously forecast before all the changes for buses that, and for passenger cars as well, that China would be moving into the second ranking. We've downgraded this, given those changes. So now I'm going to look at the supply network. So I'm going to run you through the existing AGU producers that we are aware of, where they're positioned, and how they service the market, and what's going to be needed from the market to build this supply infrastructure. So a nice way to describe the supply chain in China is with this flow chart here. So we're looking from the primary urea source, how it feeds into the final end user market. So with domestic urea production, it can either go into direct urea melt production and straight into making AdBlue or concentrated solution, or it can be prilled. In China, this is the dominant path. So most AGU urea is prilled and then sent on to dissolving facilities around the country, and then it's either packaged at these plants or sent as bulk deliveries straight to the end user market. The reason why Prilling is mainly because of the positioning of domestic urea AGU producers, many of them in the main farming region around Sichuan. And so the way I've mapped it here, so we're aware of about 13 urea producers that are capable of making AGU and have on some basis, usually short term. On this map, I've taken out those that produce AGU more consistently. And the size of the bubble in this map, the yellow bubble, represents their AGU production in 2017. So you can get an idea of where these major players are. The red squares are representing where the AdBlue dissolving facilities are. So the major urban areas, the major AdBlue consuming areas are on the eastern coast. And so AGU prill is sent from these producers to these dissolving facilities. Many of them owned by the major players, Sinopec, PetroChina, and Kelas. And given the distance between them, it's more feasible to send prill rather than final AdBlue solution, given that most freight is trucked rather than sent by rail, which we see in other markets like North America, where it can make sense to do that. It's not true of China. There's also a huge amount of urea prilling capacity in China. It's regularly done for fertilizers, and this is transitioned into AGU use. And interestingly as well, one of the AGU producers in this map will actually disappear in 2018. It's the one pointed out by the arrow, which was take line in December as a major producer. So I'm now going to move in at AGU production as a whole. So we've looked at domestic AdBlue consumption, and this is where domestic AGU, some of that is sent. But there's also a large export market, which, as many of you are aware, has been in an interesting stage right now. But so what I'm showing at the bottom is so total AGU production within China. So this is taken from our automotive grade urea report, which is a quarterly service, and we build this up from speaking to producers about production rates and where they're sending products. So we can also we have our base for domestic AdBlue consumption within China, what surplus there is in the market that's sent away. So this is highlighted. The exported AGU is highlighted here as the beige color at the top. Along the top, these pie charts are showing where China's AGU exports are going on a regional basis. We also split this out in the report at a country level, particularly when it becomes interesting in regions such as Asia Pacific and Latin America, where these hot markets are. But you can see in 2016 that 53% of Chinese AGU exports were going to the Asia Pacific region, but also North America was a major market, taking 29%. When we move along our forecast, you can see that the North American market will be a smaller, will take up a smaller percentage of these exports, with Asia Pacific growing in particular. The North American market's reducing mainly because domestic production within North America has grown sizably in the past few years. And so that's brought down prices and it's led to less need to bring in prilled product. But within Asia Pacific, the major markets are Japan, will continue to be, along with India, growing over this period as well, and taking a lot more product. And then when we reach the end of our forecast, you can see that 40% of the AGU produced in China will be exported, with even more going to Asia Pacific and so forth. What I think is also interesting is looking at what's been driving, or if you look at the trend rate in AGU production between the split of domestically consumed and exported, we can see that in the short term that a lot more is being used domestically, and that's going to be the driving factor. And then over time, as AGU producers become more established and continue production, and presumably the China FOB will kind of fall to its previous historic levels, being more competitive on the market. We expect that to be to lead to a lot more Chinese AGU being exported on a percentage scale on this rate. Cool. And now I'm going to give you my concluding remarks on the current direction of the market and what we see as potential risks. So I think the key strengths really are there is a relative abundance in domestic AGU supply. So there's a strong domestic base, and so AdBlue is definitely a feasible product to make, affordable, and it's accessible for much of the country. You can also see a number of established domestic AGU producers: Sichuan Meifeng, China XLX. All these companies have been in the market for a long time, and will bring a lot more stature to the market. Other strengths are the supply network's developing fast. We're seeing a lot of the major oil retailers enter the market and be very proactive. Sinopec and PetroChina, to name two, have invested a lot of money in building the full stream of production from their own dissolving facilities to retail sites, and thinking about the way they market AdBlue and the way they license it. Equally, that leads to my third point, that consumer awareness is growing substantially. We've been running this conference for 11 years. Many are aware of the products. We have the CGT licensing program, along with a key awareness of the use of VDA and API licenses, supplementary sources. Equally, for when we look at the potential risks for the market, the use of defeat devices and illicit products is still prevalent. We have our own estimates for how much that's removing from the potential market, but it's sizable. Even though we've seen government organizations going out there and banning the sale of defeat devices on popular sites, on Alibaba, for instance, Taobao, and so forth. We can equally see that the new energy vehicle program has been impressive. For the diesel market, it has had a big effect on the bus market, particularly. We'll see it having increasing, it'll increasingly influence sales in the light vehicle market too. We'd expect to see that any diesel light vehicles will potentially be diesel hybrid at most, or and you can see that kind of trend developing. It'll potentially take away from the SCR fleet and how it's used in the AdBlue market. Equally, government policy has been highly influential for the market, and depending on the government's stance on diesel, this could have a big effect on the market. And it's one to watch out for, and one that we're keeping an eye on. But yeah, that's my presentation. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. Are there any questions? Okay, there's one here. There's a microphone coming. Just please tell me your name and company, please.
你好，我是亚大集团的李立鹏。就是刚才听了你的预测，对我们帮助也很大。就是这点我想提一个问题，就是因为我们国内现在做一些机械，它在开发那个固态氨，已经用到一汽跟华联汽车上边了。就说这个固态氨跟这个我们的那个现在目前所有的 SCR 系统，它用的是尿素，但是固态氨它不用尿素。就说对这方面您这边有没有一个分析和预测？对，谢谢。
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. So when we look at the solid ammonia market as an alternative to AdBlue. So it's something that we definitely try and track. It's difficult to say how much effect it will have on the AdBlue market. I think it's ultimately about the supply infrastructure. So there is an AdBlue infrastructure in place already, and technology is still SCR. It's just looking at an alternative urea source. We don't really track exact numbers on it. I think it will take away some demand. It's definitely popular with FAW. I think we heard that JAC use this as well. Yeah, I think I personally like to talk to you after really to find out more in terms of like how much you know in terms of how many vehicles are sold with these devices, but I can't give you too much information on that, unfortunately. But yeah, on the spot, yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Thanks. No. Okay. One thing I'd like you to comment, if possible. You mentioned that defeat devices have become an issue in China. Can you give an idea on how much we are currently assuming on this informal market? How